Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and we just got a massive info dump about Diablo 4 Season 2, as well as updates coming just to the base game, to the Eternal Realm as well. We just had a 2-hour developer live stream. There's going to be another one, a campfire chat coming up on Monday as well, with even more details about more things that were not covered today. But during today's stream, we got all the juicy details about Season 2, which is definitely bigger than Season 1, and we also learned about some quality of life changes, the new endgame boss hunting system through which you can target farm uniques and even uber uniques and more, and we're going to go over a summary of what we learned in this video. So first off, Season 2 begins October 17th. It is the season of blood, vampire themed. Season 1 ends on the same day. The gist of the story is this Lord Zaeith, this ancient vampire, is been reawoken, and he and his goons are trying to take over Sanctuary or do bad guy things. We're going to team up with a vampire hunter who's been trying to take him down, not having a whole lot of luck. At some point in the story early on, we get bitten, but because we have the blood of Lilith in us, we do not fall under the thrall of Lord Zaeith. So we retain our independence, we're not mind controlled by him, but we get cool vampire powers. We become Blade the Daywalker. That's the gist of the story, take down Lord Zaeith. Now, there's going to be some new dungeons, probably similar to how we had those malignant tunnels in Season 1. So new specific dungeons for the story narrative to play through. Some of it will involve revisiting old places and now look different now that they are under Zaeith's command. There will be new vampiric enemies with sort of vampiric style powers. A lot of them appear to be either reskins or remodels of existing enemies, but they have new toolkits, new attacks. For instance, there's these blood skeletons that differ from regular skeletons in that they're going to have some kind of area denial powers, which will allow for opportunities for counterplay on your part. Some of these enemies are going to drop lumps of blood on the floor that will turn into shields, and so you'll probably want to prioritize taking those out before they deploy their full defensive setups. On top of Lord Zaeith being that final boss, there's also something kind of cool. It's Zaeith's lieutenants, which are basically versions of you that don't have the immunity. So they're adding as enemies into the game character classes with pre-made kits, so rogue, barbarian, sorc, etc., that are going to come and ambush you. And the way they describe it, it almost sounds like it's going to be a sort of butcher encounter. They're formidable foes that can kind of spring up and come at you, but there's also things that you can do to try to trigger them, and defeating them is going to give you a good reward. Basically, they're going to give you the ability to unlock and upgrade vampiric powers. There's also going to be this new blood harvest mechanic. So think Helltide, except it's always available from level 1. It's not only unlocked on World Tier 3, so it's always available. There's some region of the world that is affected by the blood harvest. It's taken over by vampires with all vampiric things, and the quests are, you know, there's still like bounties in there, but they're more vampire related and whatever Lord Zaeith's minions are up to. And there's never any downtime, so it'll rotate through different regions in the world, but unlike Helltide, there's not some period of it being off. So it'll end in one zone and immediately begin in another zone in the world. Within Blood Harvest, there will be materials needed for seasonal stuff that you can only get in a Blood Harvest. Similar to Helltide, there's going to be some kind of currency type of material that you can only get within those zones, but unlike Helltide, that resource persists. It's not going to just disappear once the Helltide ends, once the Blood Harvest ends, so you can keep holding on to whatever and spend it whenever you want. Basically, there's going to be some interplay between a couple different systems, but it's ultimately all funneling you towards the desire to gain and upgrade your vampiric powers. So let's dive into that a bit. You're going to be able to have powers that are unique to this season, separately from Malignant Hearts, or as opposed to Malignant Hearts, which were often tailored to specific classes. These new vampiric powers are going to be all designed to be class agnostic, meaning no matter what class you are, you can make use of this. So there's going to be 22 different powers, and you can eventually equip up to 5 of these 22 powers. These powers are separated into minor and major powers, and each can be upgraded to be up to level 3. Within the minor powers, we're seeing things that are minor. They're things that can complement and help a build. Nothing truly build defining. Also nothing really that strikes me as a vampiric theme. They just kind of seem like just random buffs. It's really the major vampiric powers that actually give off the whole blood theme and blood vibe. And some of them revolve around this new vampiric curse mechanic. So some skills will allow you to inflict a vampiric curse on enemies. If you kill an enemy who is under a vampiric curse, you steal their soul, and you can store up to 8 total souls. Whenever you activate a defensive, agility, or macabre skill, you shoot out those souls, however many you have stored up, to nearby enemies as soul bombs. Reminds me kind of the Necromancer's bone spirit. So you have the Accursed Touch major vampiric power that is used to inflict vampiric curse on enemies and potentially spread it around to other nearby enemies and make those enemies take more damage. There's a Blood Boil skill that's revolving around Overpower. We're gonna see what the Overpower reworks are on Monday. Hopefully we'll see Overpower actually become a thing in Season 2. Call Familiar makes you summon a bat when you cast a Mastery, Weapon Mastery, Macabre, Wrath, or Imbuement skill. Metamorphosis is a great way for Necromancers to actually get Blood Rush from Diablo 3, except now it's Bat Rush, because when you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds, and enemies along your path take some damage and get inflicted by Vampiric Curse. And then Moonrise makes you build up attack speed until you reach a Vampiric Blood Rage, which has synergy with basic skills, so there's probably going to be some kind of basic attack builds possible within Season 2. Now the thing with these vampiric powers is that they have prerequisites to equip them. So in Season 1, every piece of jewelry dropped with a specific socket color to socket the correct heart into it. So that's gone. Now it's every other piece of gear, every piece of armor will have the possibility to drop with certain affixes on them. Well, they're not affixes because they don't take up an affix pool. They're called Pacts, and they're just represented by these little icons at the bottom of the gear. And in order to equip a certain vampiric power, you must have gear with the corresponding Pacts. So for instance, the Metamorphosis vampiric power requires 2 Ferocity Pacts, 2 Divinity Pacts, and 2 Eternity Pacts. Those are the 3 different types of Pacts. So that means in order to equip this, you need to have on your gear, maybe on your helm you have 2 Eternity, maybe on your chest you have 1 Eternity, 1 Divinity, but whatever it is, you need to match that on your gear. And in addition to that, my understanding is that if you have 2 separate vampiric powers that each require 1 Ferocity Pact, then you need 2 Ferocity across your gear, not just 1. So every power will pull its amount of Ferocity required. So this is adding an extra itemization game, which sounds like a stash nightmare being added, because now we have to hold even more items to match the correct pacts for the different skills that we may need, and we need to basically move around gear depending on what pact we need. It does sound like as we get higher level, we're going to get more pacts on gear. So first off, pacts more often on gear, and secondly, more pacts on gear. But to ease with the itemization nightmare, we also are going to be getting some items that allow us to cleanse gear of pacts, basically erase the existing pacts. It could either erase all the pacts, some items will erase only select pacts, and I do believe every piece of gear can only have 3 pacts on it in total. But there's also going to be items that will allow you to specifically add a pact or multiple pacts of a certain type, specific type, to the gear. So it's deterministic crafting, basically, is what's being added. That's probably the best way to put it. So you get these RNG item pacts, but we're getting currency, if you want to call it that way, as crafting materials to deterministically alter and shape your gear. I imagine what the flow of the gameplay will be is that as you are leveling, you're going to be using whatever you find, whatever packs that you can fit on, but as you get to the end game, probably 70+, at that point, you're going to be customizing your gear with this crafting currency to tailor the exact gear for the exact packs that you want. That's my speculation. In fact, on further reflection, I've definitely seen items that have more than 3. So there is actually not a cap of 3 on how many pacts any given piece of gear can hold. And just to clarify, it's every piece of armor, so excluding weapons, that can have pacts on it. So that's the entirety of the season theme. Again, overall bigger theme than season 1, because now we have this whole overworld activity with its associated mini events within it to do. This whole vampiric power system allows us to equip up to 5 new skills. I mean, you're going to eventually equip up to the full 5. I don't see you in any endgame build not using up 5 skills there, because it's just free extra power. And the ability to level up these skills, and the crafting. This is kind of really the first crafting system added to the game, by needing to craft the prerequisites on your gear, or, you know, RNG find them in order to be able to equip this. Overall, definitely a bigger season than season 1. We'll have to see how exactly those blood harvests play out, but I'm hoping that's actually going to be the new leveling method. We got more stuff to cover later on that actually suggests that bounties are going to be, in general, a great way to level, and there should be bounties within blood harvest as well. My only concern here is, are we going to have to hoard more items, which is going to put more of a squeeze on our stash space? Thankfully, we do have some good news in that regard, which we'll get to in a little bit here, as we're now moving into changes that are going to make it into the base game. So this is going to be, everything else from here on out is going to Eternal Realm in the game forever. And the first thing is a new end game boss system. And really the best way to explain how these get added to the game is by doing a side-by-side comparison of what the current end game looks like, which is this right here. Well, not just the end game, this is what the entire game looks like, right? This is all the activities that you have to do in the game. And as you can see by end game, really there's not a whole lot to do. Really, the only pinnacle content you're pushed towards is Echo of Lilith, but otherwise it's basically just Nightmare Dungeons. You can do some Whispers, you can do some Helltide, you can do some Legion events, you can do some world bosses, but really Nightmare Dungeons is all you should be doing if all you care about is maximizing the efficiency of your character. It's where all the XP is where you level up your glyphs. At this point now you can get materials from it that you very rarely need to do anything other than Nightmare Dungeons. But now in the Season of Blood, or rather dropping with the Seasonal of Blood patch and making it to Eternal Realm as well, so Eternal players are also getting this content added, you can see that the Echo of Varshan, which was the Season 1 boss, he's being added into World Tier 3, as well as a new boss called Grigwar the Galvanic Saint. Now, just to jump ahead of ourselves a bit here, 5 bosses are being added as part of this endgame system, but 2 of them come online in World Tier 3. In order to fight the Echo of Varshan, you have to do Whispers. You will get materials needed to craft the key to fight the Echo of Varshan. Similarly with Grigwar, you have to do Helltide to get the material required to craft the key to fight Grigwar. Then when we go to World Tier 4, something similar happens. You can fight the higher level Echo of Varshan, the higher level Grigwar. You gotta do now Whispers and Helltide at World Tier 4 to unlock the fights with them. But now also we get another one, the Beast in the Ice. By doing Nightmare Dungeons Tiers 21 plus, you will get the materials needed to craft the key to fight the Beast in the Ice. Also, Lord Zaeith, while there is a campaign version of Lord Zaeith, there's also going to be a endgame version of him. You gotta do world bosses to farm one half of the key and Legion events to farm the other half of the key, and doing those combined events will get you the keys necessary to fight Lord Zaeith. Then the final uber boss is Duriel, King of Maggots. Yes, Duriel is Lord of Pain, but this is a specific variant of Duriel, a very poison-themed variant of Duriel called the King of Maggots. He is not exactly the campaign version of him. And to fight him, you gotta do Echoes of Varshan and Grigwar to get the keys material to open the portal or whatever it is to fight Duriel. Now you might be asking, why? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to farm these bosses? Well, deterministic ability to target farm unique and uber unique items. Every one of these 5 bosses will have its own pool, its own drop pool, with uniques, specific uniques on it. So whatever unique you might be hunting for your build, and 12 uniques are being added this season, and they're they are reworking nearly every unique, or making changes to every unique, or nearly every unique. They're going to talk about those next week. That's why I'm a bit hesitant here to talk about scope. We'll see exactly what the scope of the changes are on Monday, but again, no matter what unique you're hunting for, one of these bosses will have it on their loot table, so you will be able to target farm that boss. Then, Duriel has the uber uniques. So all those uber uniques, the super duper duper rare items that no one ever gets, you can target farm them from Duriel. They have a very low chance to drop, but the devs have said you will now know someone in a season who has an uber unique. So that's a giant improvement from no one you know, or even anyone who you know, who they know, who they know, who they know, who they know, has an uber unique. Altogether, I think these bosses are a fantastic addition to the game. I think if they had been in the game since launch, that would have curtailed a lot of people's complaints about Endgame and what to do in the Endgame, because, again, right now, what do you do in Endgame? You do Nightmare Dungeons, and that's it. Now, at least you have the ability to target farm for specific things, and in order to target farm for those things, you have to do a variety of things. So all these endgame systems you need to engage with in order to get the things that you want, to upgrade the things that you need, to be more powerful, to do more things like defeating the Echo of Lilith. Echo of Lilith does remain the most powerful boss in the game. Uber Duriel here is not as challenging as Uber Lilith. Furthermore, it sounds like every boss is going to be tuned to some kind of element. Duriel is poison, Beast in the Ice is ice, Grigor is lightning, etc. And this seems to have some importance for the resistance rework. So what they said was you will want to stack the relevant resistance to take on these bosses. That again concerns me though, with regards to having to hold even more items in our stash to put on, oh, I'm fighting the lightning boss, let me go get my lightning gear. Now I gotta hold a whole set of lightning gear. I do appreciate that resistances are being made more useful. We're gonna have to see exactly what the resistance changes will be on Monday's stream to see how this all works into the bigger picture. It's difficult to just analyze this half of the equation without seeing the other half. And coming to a sum. We should also clarify that the drop tables, it doesn't matter whether you're on World Tier 3 or World Tier 4 for Echoes of Varshan and for Grigor, it's the same items on the drop table. The difference is on World Tier 3 you get sacred versions of those uniques, and on World Tier 4 you would get the ancestral versions. Now, while Duriel isn't as difficult as Lilith, he is a level 100 boss, so he's not exactly easy, but they said that if you properly stack all your poison resist, the fight becomes manageable. He's a challenge, but he's not quite a pinnacle challenge. Also, all these materials to open up these keys and whatever, fully tradable. Fully tradable. So in theory, if you don't want to have to farm up all these keys, you can find someone to trade with to give you that key for Duriel. This is their way of making gold a little bit more meaningful. Now, I generally have mixed feelings about drop tables in ARPGs. I dislike that, oh, the only place I can get this item is against this boss. I'd prefer it if it's like, every boss has a weighted drop table. So, yeah, maybe item X, you're 10 times more likely to get it on this boss, but you still have some chance of getting it on this other boss. That's kind of how it was in D2 for the most part, right? Where, depending on what you were looking for, you had multiple options, but there were more efficient bosses to farm for specific items, in that it was more about how the different items were weighted on different bosses, as opposed to some bosses just, like, this is the only monster that you can kill to get this one item. Now, maybe I'm mistaken, and maybe just when you fight any of these bosses, they still have just a general loot table that could randomly drop anything. Maybe that just went unsaid because it was assumed to be the case. But it did kind of sound like, no, this is the list of the only uniques that will drop from this boss. Like, I think in Diablo 2, sometimes what you would see is a creature might have a regular loot table for, like, the regular, just, you know, general stuff, and then, like, a special loot table on top of that, so that you could potentially get, you know, 2 drops. One pulled from their special table, and one just from the generic table. Overall, though, I do think this is a great addition to the game that'll give us more to do in the endgame. Now, in addition to that, we got a bunch of just general improvements to the game. Incense now grants an XP bonus. The bonuses you get from Incense will now persist through death, so you don't just lose it once you die. And a huge thing, XP bonuses are now multiplicative with your world tier. So, it used to be that, you know, these little tiny percentage bonuses that you would get to XP from whatever sources effectively were meaningless in World Tier 4 because all sources of XP were additive with each other, and World Tier 4 is already giving a 200% XP buff. So if you get a 5% XP buff, now you're getting a 205% XP buff, which is substantially less than the 5% that it actually is. So now all of your sources of additional XP will add together into one bucket, and then that final number will then get multiplied after the world tier buff. Now all of a sudden, the XP from your elixirs, now from your incense, from the seasonal blessing, all of these now will be much more significant. They said that overall, all things considered, all the changes they're making, your time to reach level 100 in Season 2 will be 40% faster, 40% faster than in Season 1. They explicitly said that they do want players to reach level 100. They wanted to smooth over the 75 to 100, they really wanted it to feel like an achievable goal. Also, Renown will always carry over. You never have to farm Renown again, so all your Renown bonuses are just going to be on every character forever. You can still choose to do Renown if you want to, you'll still build up the points, but all the unlocks from Renown, the potions, the skill points, all that will persist now to all your future characters. Also, if you skip campaign, you're going to get 10 additional waypoints unlocked. That's going to be 2 per zone. The change that they had made where monsters would tail behind you in level at some point and you would outlevel the monsters, they're reverting that. Monsters won't do that anymore. They realized that, oh, well, now people are getting drops that are lower level than them, and it created a whole other problem. We're getting 2 additional character slots. Once Season 1 ends, your seasonal character becomes a Eternal Realm character. All items in your seasonal stash are going to get mailed to a new extract-only stash tab. So on the Eternal Realm, you're going to see a new stash tab, or I guess tabs, with all of the stuff from your Season 1 stash, but you can only pull items out. You can never put anything back in, so eventually you're going to pull everything out, the tab disappears. But you only have until the end of Season 2 to do that, after which those tabs get deleted. Then we've got some changes to town layouts. The Occultist is now near the Tree of Whispers. We're going to have stashes in more convenient locations. The Gambler is going to be closer to the waypoints in the major cities. And these are fantastic changes, but I recently expressed how one of my frustrations with D4 is that there are lessons that were learned in D3 that were not carried through, and that's one of them. We went through this exactly in Diablo 3, that you know, the city designers, they want to make their cities like a little bit more immersive, a little bit more realistic. They don't want to just cluster everything together into the optimal video game layout. They want to give you reason to actually explore this nice big city, whatever. But players complained, and they ended up changing the town layouts to make them more ergonomic or efficient. And then Diablo 4 comes, and we have the same thing. The towns are the sprawling things that have you run from one end of the town to the other. And now again, at least we don't have to wait as long for this change to happen as we had with Diablo 3, but I'm still scratching my noggin like, but we learned this, why did we launch with it this way? We have some great mount changes coming, so the mounts are going to be less likely to get stuck on things. They're going to be more likely to jump over traversal obstacles. The base mount speed is being increased by 14%, so like when you're in town, the top speed is untouched, and we still cannot go top speed in town for whatever reason. It's going to be easier to reach full speed on PC now, so if you're unaware, the further your mouse cursor is from your mount, the faster you go. And to reach top speed, you basically have to bring your cursor to the edge of the screen. So if you're, depending on how you're navigating terrain or how you're playing, you might not be going at quite the full speed. So now they're making it easier to reach that top speed. You have to only be about halfway to the edge of the screen, and you'll be activating full speed. The reason they don't want to just be constantly full speed is because sometimes you want to navigate around obstacles, and you need to slow down basically to go a bit more carefully. So you bring your cursor way close to you to slow down. They've increased the duration of the horse speed boost by 50%. And wonderful change, the damn barricades, now if you use your speed boost, you smash through the damn barricades. They've also made some changes to the cooldown on when you get off your mount for whatever reason, how long it takes to get back on that mount. If you manually dismount, instead of taking 10 seconds before you can get back on it, it's now only 5 seconds. If you get knocked off your horse, it used to be 30 seconds before you can get back on, now it's only 15. And if you dismount with a combat skill, it used to take 10 seconds to remount, now it's only 3 seconds. So this actually encourages use of the dismount skills, even if it's just for a cool effect, even if it's not doing much damage. You know, it used to be that I had no reason to use the dismount skill. I would just physically dismount because it made no difference. Now I'm going to do it and go through that little cool animation just to get those 2 extra seconds back. Changes in Nightmare Dungeons, you will now teleport straight into the Nightmare Dungeon as opposed to right outside and have to do the whole double loading screen thing. They've increased the monster density of dungeon events. Maybe I'll want to do them now and not just skip them. Also, the NPCs in dungeon events aren't going to die in 1 hit anymore, apparently, in World Tier 4. So you might actually be able to succeed on some of them. They've improved the readability of traps within Nightmare Dungeons, and the amount of CC that you get on you for traps, and just in general across most monsters, has been reduced. So just overall, across the whole game, the amount of crowd control that you get on you, you're going to be spending less time crowd controlled. They increased the amount of Paragon Glyph XP you get, so it's going to be easier and faster to level up our Paragon Glyphs. They've rebalanced some of the Nightmare Dungeon affixes to make them less one-shotty or insta-deathy or just otherwise unpleasant to do to the point that you just auto-salvage them. So backstabbers previously would just deal a huge spike of damage that led to a lot of one-shots. Now what they do is make you vulnerable and increase the amount of vulnerable damage that you take. So still potentially lethal, but it now gives you a chance to counterplay. You see, oh, I'm vulnerable, I can now be more defensive, as opposed to just, boom, you're hit and you're dead. For Death Pulse, there won't be any Death Pulses on monsters that already have on-death effects, and Death Pulses can no longer spawn on top of each other, so you're not going to have a situation where you just kill a bunch of enemies on screen, and now the entire screen is just Death Pulses and you have nowhere safe to be. Then the Lightning Storm, where, oh, I gotta go back to the bubble for safety, often having to backtrack. Now, if you are in the bubble when the lightning strikes, you get a 35% speed buff for a few seconds to be able to make up for the time of having to backtrack into the bubble. They've also nerfed the duration of the drifting shade, that's the blinding effect, and how often it spawns, again to make it less painful. They've also outright removed objectives from a number of dungeons, turning them just into straight boss runs. And for other dungeons, they've ensured that the objectives are placed only along the critical paths. So they've changed more things to remove backtracking. You can look at this graphic here, for instance. They don't want dungeons to become too linear, but they're changing the layouts to limit backtracking. And this is something that I've been saying for a while now. I keep bringing up what I call circular map design. This comes back from my background in playing FPS games, Unreal Tournament. The best maps were always, quote, circular in design, in that you never get dead-ended somewhere. The flow of gameplay is always nice and it feels good, and you're taken from one place to the next place to the next place. And, I mean, you can almost literally see the circles here now in this after image, where you're always looped back onto the main path without needing to backtrack. Whereas on the left, if you had not turned right and you had continued to go down that corridor and then gone left, you would have realized, oh, I missed all those bosses, now I gotta come all the way back. Legion events will now spawn every 25 minutes instead of every 30 minutes. World bosses now spawn every 3.5 hours instead of every 6 hours. Huge change. They did not buff the world bosses, or as far as we're aware, there's no other changes to the world bosses other than now we need those crafting mats to get the keys to farm the Uber bosses. So we will be doing more world bosses, but not for that loot, just for those materials to do the Ubers. When you get Nightmare Dungeons from the Tree of Whispers, the level of the Nightmare Dungeon will always be within 5 levels of the highest Nightmare Dungeon level that you've cleared, as opposed to like significantly weaker and then you just salvage it. Also, the gold reward for Whispers, for Whisper caches, has been greatly increased. They really emphasized how greatly this has been increased, and they're saying that Whispers will now be a way to farm gold. So let's say you got to do a big respec, or you want to keep re-rolling an item at the Enchantress, you can farm gold from Whispers. Of course, gold can also become a trade currency for these keys for the Uber bosses. They're also buffing the amount of XP you get from Helltide and from Whispers. They want it to be more competitive with Nightmare Dungeons, so that when you're doing these other activities, Whispers and Helltide, you're getting a variety of rewards. They stressed in particular the 1 to 50 XP for Whispers has been buffed, so I suspect that Whispers, probably Whispers within the Blood Harvest, will be the most effective way to level up in Season 2. Sorry, when I say level up, 1 to 50, level 1 to 50. Also, your Whisper caches will now strictly adhere to the item slot. It used to be that you could randomly get other items in a boots cache, now you only get boots. In terms of user interface and user experience, now you can mark items not only as junk, but you can also mark items as favorite. So instead of at the end of your Nightmare Dungeon run, right, you do 2 Nightmare Dungeon runs, your inventory is full. You look through your items, junk, 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 and like you keep 3 items maybe, and then you junk the rest. Now you can do the opposite. You can just look through them and say, oh, favorite, favorite, and then you can salvage everything else. So items that are favorited will not be salvaged. Also, when you extract aspects of the same type will get grouped together in your aspect tab. Sorry, not just aspects of the same type, because that's already happening. Aspects that are the same aspect will get grouped together. So if you have 2 cheats, they'll be together as opposed to randomly within the defensive bundle you have. Similarly, just actual affixes on your gear will now follow a more standard procedure. As in, like, if strength appears here on one piece of gear, it's going to appear in the same place on the other, as opposed to just them all being randomly sorted in some random order. Again, this is another thing that we learned in D3. Why did this not launch with the game? Again, I'm happy that it's happening, but strict ordering of affixes does just make it easier to compare items. Then, huge, wonderful change, we can search the stash. You can either text search, or you can even filter via different icons. Wonderful quality of life right there. They've also added an auto run feature, which I didn't understand at first, and then it clicked, and it's an amazing feature. So you can press a button and you just keep running in whatever direction your mouse is pointing at. Meaning you can bring up your inventory, or you can bring up the map and you keep moving. So this is gonna tremendously improve the whole, like, oh, you know, people have been asking for an overlay map since before launch. Now that you can keep moving with the map open, that's going to help things significantly. Also, the mini-map is going to be zoomed out more, another wonderful change to us needing to open up our local map less. Another huge change, gems. You don't have to pick up gems anymore. They're not a piece of inventory that exists as something that you pick up. Now you get gem materials that go straight into your material tab, and you just craft whatever gems you want at the jeweler or whatever it is. Wonderful change to make room in our stash and make us have to click and pick up less things. You can also salvage the gems that you have and then use the materials to craft better gems. Enchantment costs have been updated. Overall, the cost to enchant has been lowered. The cost of your first enchant has been raised a bit, but now the costs aren't going to rise so sharply as they previously did. Another great change in World Tier 3, when we're talking about normal magic and rare gear, the only ones that drop will be sacred. No more normal tier, normal magic and rare items will drop. Instead, it's going to be crafting materials. Similarly, in World Tier 4, you're not going to get anything other than ancestral, normal, white, blue, and yellow items. Great change. Reduces the need for a loot filter. I've always said that a loot filter is a solution to a problem, or it's a band-aid to a problem. But if we can stop the problem from existing to begin with, then we don't need loot filters. And I would rather address the underlying issue. This is, in a way, an attempt to address the underlying issue, where when you're in World Tier 3, World Tier 4, you really have no need ever to pick up non-sacred or non-ancestral versions of those base items. So it reaches a point where I ask, if we're not doing anything with these items, which D4 is not, right? Diablo 2 did have reason for maybe an endgame character to equip a blue item. Maybe you had a reason to equip a white item, or at least want to pick up a white item, right? So that you can use it as a base for a rune word. If there's literally no reason for these items to exist other than to be salvaged, just give me this. Just give me the crafting material. Just have it drop already as crafting material, and that's what's happening here. On the topic of loot filters, though, they did say in the Q&A later that it's something that they are aware people want, and it's stuff that they're keeping in mind. Now, just to clarify, legendary items in World Tier 3 are not guaranteed to be sacred. They could be just regular. Similarly, in World Tier 4, you could still be getting the sacred or any kind of non-ancestral legendary or unique. Then they're also making a change where higher level monsters are going to drop gear with higher item power level potential. So starting with level 55 monsters will have an increasing amount of item power potential than at present. So that goes for sacred items in World Tier 3 at level 55, and then the same thing happens with ancestral items in World Tier 4 starting at level 75, so before level 75, the item level potential remains the same, but starting at level 75, every level thereafter, for every level thereafter, there's a +2 to the max possible item level that the monster can drop. So that goes all the way to level 100, where now the max potential item power is 920. And then when you're fighting monsters above level 100, like in Nightmare Dungeons, where monsters can go up to level 150, for every level after that, you're no longer increasing the maximum item power potential, but you're increasing the minimum. So you're closing the range and focusing more on the higher range. I do like the idea of the window getting smaller. I'm not sure how I feel about the item power increasing. I need to think this through more, or maybe experience it in practice, but what I don't want to see, and this is me personally because I know some people feel differently, where they want to be at level 100 farming better gear. I like the idea that at level, like once I'm in World Tier 4, I could get my GG best endgame drop. I don't like the idea that, oh, at level 100 I'm going to replace every piece of gear with better gear. It's fine if that's mostly true, but if we have no possibility of holding on to any gear, then it's hard to get excited about any gear at level 70 because you know you're not going to keep it forever. So I'm not sure if this change actually changes that. It might not, because there are item power breakpoints, and once you've reached the max breakpoint, then you're not really getting any additional benefit out of higher item power. But it's unclear whether they're adding another breakpoint or what exactly is happening there. I think maybe I just need more time to digest this system, but if you understand what's going on here, folks, do sound off in the comments. Then to buff Whispers, items that you get from Whisper caches will have +10 to their item power relative to what you would have gotten otherwise. And from the legendary Whisper caches, it'll be +20 instead. Helltide caches will give you +20 to your item power. Duriel will be preferentially dropping item power 920 things. There's still a range on what he can drop, but he can drop 920, and the Uber Uniques will always drop at 920 and max rolled. So when you get an Uber Unique, that's it. You're done. You never have to get a better version of that same Uber Unique. That's a great change. If you get a Shaco, that's it. There's never a feels bad moment of, oh, I got a poorly rolled Shaco, or now I gotta get a better one. And again, nearly every unique is getting some kind of update. We'll find out more on October 10th. That plus the changes to resistances. Plus, I said there's going to be more to discuss at BlizzCon. Check out this video here, folks. I think they're going to talk about the first expansion at BlizzCon. And to confirm, we've seen here that they refer to this coming patch as patch 1.2. The Season 2 patch is patch 1.2. So it's not 2.0, despite the big changes that they're making. It is not 2.0, and the reason that video here, I think, we're talking about the first expansion, is because we saw version 2.0 of Diablo 4 on the CDN. Again, check out that video for the full discussion and details there. Also, for Smoldering Ashes, on the Battle Pass, they've reduced the level you need to be to unlock them. There's going to be 3 new blessings for Season 2, in addition to the ones that already exist. Also, for Season 2, October 17th, D4 is launching on Steam. So if you haven't bought the game yet and you wanted to buy it, you can get it on Steam now instead of Battle.net. It's going to be full crossplay like every other version of the game. You cannot, however, transfer your game from one to the other. So if you already bought it on Battle.net, you cannot get it for free on Steam, and vice versa. In the Q&A, we learned a couple more things. They're working on a Paragon reset button, or at least they hinted that they're working on it. They clarified that the stash search can also work for legendary affixes. They confirmed that the amount of platinum, the premium currency that you get from the Battle Pass, will now be enough to at least buy something or some things in the shop. They confirmed that for Season 2 they're adding about 12 unique items to the game, but in general they're aiming to add about 6 per season. They've reaffirmed that they would like to add in the future the ability to save loadouts, like in Diablo 3, the Armory, where you can save your build, like so all of your skills and your gear setup, and easily swap between them. They said that that's something that they would like to add. When asked about the idea of having some way to permanently upgrade the aspects in your codex, that's something that they're thinking about. They'll have more to share on that front in the future. They reaffirmed leaderboards are coming Season 3. They had previously stated that they're creating a new activity that will be tied specifically to the leaderboards. And that is effectively it in not quite a nutshell, but several nutshells. A lot of content to cover there. But yeah, that is the big 1.2 and Season 2 update for D4. Well, at least part of it. We're, again, going to learn more details on Monday. So, I like where things are going. I think things are moving in a positive direction here. I'm really happy with the scope of Season 2. This is probably aided by the fact that it's coupled with this addition to the base game of all these bosses. I'm truly hoping that this does manifest into us doing a greater variety of things. It's always like, well, in theory, yeah, this means we're going to be doing all these different things for different purposes. In practice, we'll see if it turns out, oh, actually, you know, it's more efficient to just do activity X. But I'm feeling pretty optimistic here. How about you folks? How are you feeling after all this? Sound off in the comments. And again, on, oh, it's not Monday, it's Tuesday, isn't it? On the 10th, we'll have another video covering the next stream. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more Diablo content.